Before we get involved in the nitty-gritty of what you've actually done, let's talk about your family. How do they handle you're here, you're there, do they recognize you sometimes when you come home?
You know, families go through different phases. So I think we're in a different phase in our family evolution. So my wife is writing a book at the moment on the 40 cities that we've traveled with our kids from a very early age, from the age of the first child who was 9 months of age. And the book is about essentially how to travel with children and the kind of interesting things to do in each of these cities. In fact, she's already written the book. She just has to edit it, and she wants to make it perfect. And I always say, perfection is the enemy of good. Just get it done. But I'm saying it because the first, I guess, 20 years or more or less 18 to 20 years of our family life was spent doing interesting things in the world, traveling, participating in meaningful journeys on sustainability, climate change, philanthropy, children's rights, all those kinds of things. And it's been a fascinating experience to watch my kids grow up to be really wonderful children, wonderful adults that care for the world because of that exposure and who understand the world, I would hazard to say, better than a lot of other children because they've not grown up with prejudice. They've grown up to, as Mark Twain says, the most serious antidote to prejudice is to travel. And I think my kids have been lucky enough to grow up in understanding is different people in the world, different religions in the world, different kind of things in the world, so that they've developed a personality which is almost, I would say, ideal for the new South Africa. I used to have a couple of policies for my first, I would say, 14 years being in business, and certainly before that as a doctor, was that no work on a weekend, and always make sure that when I'm in the country, I'm home for dinner. I think I did that pretty much for most of the time, and always going on holiday for 2 months a year. Now, if you say to people, but my goodness, you went on holiday for 2 months a year, that's precisely the book that my wife is writing. We used to take a country during June and July, the school holidays, and we used to spend just 1 month in the country, which included knowing everything about that country theoretically, understanding, learning a little bit of the language, and then going to visit key interesting points in that country for 1 month, whether it was going on a train or traveling by car or whatever. But for 1 month we can, we got to know countries, cultures and people, interesting things. Today, of course, it's different. Today I have my projects and projects that I do, which is to use business to create a better world.
All right, let's change tack a little bit now and deal with the Sekunjalo purchase of the independent newspaper group. That was an enormous purchase. I read in certain areas it was an emotional purchase because you wished to hand it back to South Africa, specifically for Madiba, who wished for it to come back. Was it an emotional purchase from your point of view, or was it a strictly business purchase?
When is business strictly business? It's, even if you're buying a pharmaceutical company, you're buying more than just pharmaceuticals. You're buying the opportunity to treat people better, to get people better. You're buying scientific research. You're buying employees that have dedicated their lives to an enterprise. And so all of those things, clearly over and above the balance sheet or the profit motive, must be a factor when you're investing or acquiring businesses. I like to believe that independence acquisition is first of all a business acquisition. It's a wonderful asset, and I think we bought it at just the right time. If you look at the fact that Jeff Bezos has bought the Washington Post for $250 million, and the Washington Post is losing $50 million a year. We have bought a business for $200 million plus, and we are making, $30 million a year profit. So it's a very different acquisition. I think it's a business with a good opportunity to have a technological mission, technologically solutions mission, which includes mobile and digital and other platforms and audio, etc. And it's a good business that has a social mission. And the social mission would be, first and foremost, to keep people employed in the print industry and to invest in it, and not to take the profits, as the Irish did, back to Ireland and not invest it back into the people. So my first social mission is to invest in editorial content, to develop people in the organization, so that in the next 3 years, Independent will be known as a group, a media group that you can have reliable content that people will respect, people will want to read. They will feel they can trust it. It's very important. And to have a very diverse amount of opinion pieces coming into the media. Right now, our media, is part of the problem with all the media groups. It's not the fact that they're political. Of course, you can interpret politics in every possible way. It's the fact that there are not enough people that can produce high quality, good, solid journalism that would, have someone like you wanting to go and buy our newspapers, such as the Cape Times in Cape Town or the Argus in the morning, and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to buy this every day because I really enjoy reading this, because the kind of quality, editorial content. I mean, I spent a couple of days at the Wall Street Journal in New York 2 months ago, and I was fascinated by how the Wall Street Journal went from pretty much near bankruptcy to highly successful print business today, and selling, I think I'm speaking under correction, but if I remember Rebecca Rubinson telling me, the deputy editor, 7 million copies on a Saturday, and now I think bigger than the New York Times. So the thing is that, and I listened very carefully to this business transformation of the Wall Street Journal from obliteration with the advent of digital towards a highly successful print business with digital, of course, and with video as a very important component. So I think there's a lot out there that we can do at Independent.
There is a certain newspaper group, which will remain nameless for the moment, that every Sunday you open their newspapers and it's attacking the government. Now, it's good to expose wrongdoings, but to keep on attacking, it's almost like there is a squad there designated to attack all the time and put bad news in the newspapers and make everybody's weekend miserable reading the bad news. And the worst it does is affect overseas investment, of course. Now, we need good news. Will you look at that kind of situation with the Independent newspaper group?
No, I don't think that our role is to say to people we need good news.
No, but it's not to give bad news all the time either.
I don't think that is, what we should be doing. I think editors that will ultimately make these kinds of decisions must consider the country as a whole, and they must have balance. They must write the stories which no one wants to write about, but they must also find the good stories that exist in the country and the good people that exist in the country. That is, what editors have to do. I personally felt the venom and the one-sidedness and the absence of balance in the attacks that the Times Media Group, for instance, launched against myself, with no objective basis whatsoever. At no stage there was an article by someone called Chris Barron in the Sunday Times. He wrote this article without absolutely consulting me or checking the facts or doing anything, and it was clearly, regrettably, one-sided. Now, I think when you conduct, that kind of journalism, where you're sensationalist for the sake of being sensationalist.
Isn't part of the problem, and we're coming towards the end of our interview now, that we have a naive public and a naive journalist force that creates this problem half of the time? They're very naive compared to their overseas counterparts.
I don't think you can blame the journalists for that. And I don't think you can blame the public for that. I think you have to blame the shareholders that give directive to their editors and managers to be highly sensationalist in order to sell more newspapers. I think that, there must be a decision, a conscious decision. If I look, for instance, at, for example, you mentioned the Sunday Times. If I look at the headline and the front page, week after week, it is all about, one controversy after the other. What we require is good, strong editorial content and training.
And policy.
And policy, yes, but, send people back to the basics, the good journalists that used to exist in the past. Yes,
but there must be ground rules.
There must be ground rules. The ground rules have to be there. There's got to be ethics. There's got to be balance. There's got to be, the whole story has to be told. Always get both sides. Divorce yourself personally from the issues that are at hand. I think many of our journalists, in order to curry favor with the managers or editors and with the shareholders, continue to do things in ways which defies logic, by the way, I must tell you. The more I understand the media business, the more I'm beginning to understand the need for a complete re-education of the editorial teams in this industry.